Thank you very much. Hey, welcome to the Two Faces. Oh, in your honor, Mr. Dorman. You have lange gesunde Jahren and a lot of luck. Any success?
Yeah.
You have some people stuck in the lift.
No.
They're getting sorted out.
But it's fantastic.
Maybe you broke it.
We just managed to stay calm. Stuck in the lift. I was surprised never go in the lift. Then I would do my business store.
Working? Yes, okay. Has to go. Yeah, has to go back down to the so.
Don't come to look at.
Yeah, you made it. Welcome back. So this week, make yourself comfortable. This week is Parshas Mishpatim and Parshas Shkolim. Shabbos Mevarchim Adar, which makes it Parshas Shkolim. We take out two Torahs this Shabbos. First Torah we read Parshas Mishpatim, and the second Torah we read Parshas Shkolim. So to share a thought on both these parshas to start with. So Parshas Mishpatim is a very interesting parsha. It starts with the words Ve'ele HaMishpatim Asher with Mehem. These are the Mishpatim, the laws, and generally Mishpatim refer to laws that are rational laws. That makes sense. As the laws, most of the laws in this week's Sedra are laws of monetary matters, just like every country has monetary laws. So the Torah provides monetary law to the Jewish people to go by. If somebody borrows from someone, doesn't pay back, somebody entrusts an article with someone to guard and it disappears, they admit, they don't admit, they say it was stolen, it wasn't stolen. So there's all kinds of laws that apply. And these are laws that are rational laws. Everything makes sense. As opposed to chukim, which are statutes where the Torah says this is the way it is, and don't ask any questions. This is the will of Hashem, and it's not for discussion. Mishpatim, on the other hand, are rational laws. They make sense. They're very commonsensical, very rational. Baruch Hashem, you're supposed to. So the Sedra begins with the words Ve'ele HaMishpatim Asher Tachtim B'fneihem, which literally means, and these are the Mishpatim that you should place before them. These are the laws that you should place before them. And we all know that we never start a sentence with an and. Surely don't start a paragraph with an and. And surely don't start a chapter with an and. So how is it that the Sedra begins with Ve'ele HaMishpatim? It should have started Eile HaMishpatim. I said we don't start a sentence with an and. And A-N-D.
Oh, A-N-D.
Yeah? And surely don't start a paragraph or a chapter with an and. So here we have a whole Sedra, and it starts Ve'ele HaMishpatim, and these are the Mishpatim. It should have started Eile HaMishpatim. These are the laws. Why does it start with a vav? So our sages say Ve'ele Moisif al Harishayin. That the fact that it says Ve'ele and these means it's a continuation or an addition to what we learned last week, Parshas Shiur. What did we learn in Parshas Shiur? In Parshas Shiur, we have the 10 Commandments, the Aseres HaDibros. So the Torah tells us Ve'ele HaMishpatim Ma'arishayin Misinai Af Elu Misinai. Just like what we learned last week came from Sinai. So these laws also came from Sinai. In other words, you might have thought, being that they're completely rational laws and they're very commonsensical, so they didn't need to be from a revelation from Sinai. They didn't need to be part of the Torah that was given at Sinai. They just make sense. So Moshe Rabbeinu told them the rational conclusion. So the pasuk says you should know ve'ela hamishpatim ve'ela meisef al rishonim ma rishonim misinai avelu misinai. Just like what we learned last week, Naseres HaDibros came directly from the divine revelation at Sinai. So these laws also came from the divine revelation at Sinai. Now, what does it mean ve'ela meisef al rishonim? It's adding to what was there before, which seems to imply that there's something more. There's one up in these laws, even more than the Naseres HaDibros. Even more than what we learned last week. That is that we know that what's unique about Mishpatim is that we don't just have to follow them, we also need to understand them. They were given in such a manner that we can understand them. I think we've referred to this many times by quoting from the Haggadah. In the Haggadah we say there's 4 tongues. The first one is the Chacham. So what does the Chacham ask? Chacham asks, what are these testimonial laws and statutes and rational laws that Hashem has commanded? In other words, he knows that there are 3 types of mitzvahs. There's Eidos. Eidos are testimonial laws, like we keep Shabbos to give testimony to the fact that Hashem created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. We keep Pesach to give testimony to the fact that Hashem took us out of Egypt. We keep Sukkot to give testimony to the fact that Hashem protected us in the desert with the clouds of glory. Those are eidos. Those are mitzvahs that give testimony to events that took place in our history. Then there are chukim. Chukim are laws that Hashem tells us, this is what I want you to do. I'm not giving you any reasons. For example, paraduma, the red heifer, or the prohibition to wear shatnez, or the prohibition to eat chazer. There are chukim. Doesn't say any reasons. And then there is mishpatim. Mishpatim are laws that make sense. So the chacham comes to the Seder. The wise son comes to the Seder and he asks, by the way, I have a question. What's the question? What is this Eidos Chukim and Mishpatim that Hashem has commanded? It's very strange. He's supposed to be a wise son. He's supposed to have listened in class. Surely, attend him to school. He surely learned what Eidos are, what Chukim are, what Mishpatim are. What is he coming along now to the Seder and asking such a basic question? And the answer is even stranger. What's the answer the Haggadah gives? Give him a lesson in the laws of Pesach. And what should you teach him? That after the Karban Pesach, you're not allowed to have any dessert, any afters. What's the connection of his question to the answer? What's going on with him? So one of the explanations that's brought is that the Chacham is called a Chacham because the word Chacham comes from the word Chachma, which we learned about in Tanya. What's Chachma? Chachma is koyach ma, the capacity for self-nullification, the capacity for subservience and surrender to a higher authority. So the Chacham is an expert in Chachma, in subservience and surrender to a higher authority. So he comes along and he says, I don't understand what this is all about. I was taught that there's 3 types of mitzvahs. There's Eidos that are testimonial mitzvahs. There's chukim that Hashem had commanded us and didn't give us the reason. And then there's mishpatim that we do have reasons. I don't really care about the reasons. As far as I'm concerned, there's only one thing that interests me. Is this the will of Hashem? If it's the will of Hashem, then count me in. What difference does it make to me if it's the will of Hashem because it gives testimony to certain events, or it's the will of Hashem because Hashem just said so, or it's the will of Hashem because it makes sense? The fact that it makes sense doesn't mean anything to me. I don't really respect that so much. What I respect more than anything else is Hashem and His will. So if Hashem tells me this is what He wants, I'm interested. I'm in. Why are we differentiating between Eidos, Chukim, and Mishpatim? That's his question. Very valid question. For someone to whom the most important component in any equation is what is the will of Hashem, I'm done. If it's Hashem's will, Hashem sanctified us with His commandments, He commanded us to do such and such, I do it. I don't ask why. So what do we answer him? We answer him by giving him a lecture in the laws of Pesach. And which law do we teach him specifically? We teach him the law of Ein Maftirin Achar Pesach Havikayim. And after eating the Karban Pesach, we don't have any dessert, any after. Why not? So we all know why. because you're supposed to have the taste of the Korban Pesach in your mouth all night. And if you eat something else, it takes away the taste. It replaces the taste of the Korban Pesach with something else. So one might ask, why is it important that we have the taste of the Korban Pesach in our mouth? We fulfilled the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. We did what Hashem requires of us. And we ate the Korban Pesach. Who cares if the taste remains in your mouth? It doesn't remain in your mouth. So what do you see from here? From here you see that it's not only important to do the mitzvahs, it's also important to have the taste of the mitzvah, to have the geschmack in the mitzvah, the enjoyment of the mitzvah. How do you get a geschmack in a mitzvah? How does a mitzvah become delightful? When you understand what it's all about. And your mind also says, wow, that's a good thing. Then you can develop a delight in the mitzvah. And since the Almighty doesn't just want us to do the mitzvahs like robots, He also wants us to understand the mitzvah and therefore develop a delight in the mitzvah. So therefore, when it comes to chukim, Hashem didn't tell us any reasons. He said, this is what I want you to do. All you need to do is obey instructions. Do what I told you. But when it comes to Mishpatim, obeying instructions is not sufficient. You also have to understand why you're doing it. You have to exert yourself to understand the logic behind it. And only then are you properly fulfilling the mitzvah, because this mitzvah is Mishpatim. It's meant to be fulfilled with understanding the logic. And if you don't understand, if you don't exert yourself to understand the logic, you're only doing the mitzvah in a partial way. You're only giving your hands and feet over to Hashem, and you're not giving your mind over to Hashem. Hashem wants your mind and heart as well. So, this is more than what we had last week. Last week, Hashem appears to the Jewish people with thunder and lightning, and they said, we surrender. Whatever you say, we're going to do. Fine, it's good enough. But this week said it demands of us a new dimension of commitment. Now, we should not only accept to do whatever Hashem tells us, but we should also put our mind into it and understand it, and understand the logic behind it, and be inspired through our own understanding of why this is the correct thing. And that's why you'll see a very interesting thing in the Rashis in this week's Sedra. Those who follow the Rashis will notice a very interesting thing. In all the previous Sedras, Rashi quotes from the Pasuk, and he tells you what it means. He doesn't ask you if you think it's a good idea, if you have maybe there's another way to go about it. He quotes from the Pasuk, and he tells you what it means. Comes to this week's Sedra, Rashi quotes from the Pasuk, says what it means, and then he says, Oy einoi, maybe that's not what it means, and has a whole conversation with you, convincing you that that's what it means. Why does Rashi change his tactics in this week's Sedra? I think the answer is very simple, because this week's Sedra is all about comprehending it to the point where if I asked you, what do you think? You would say, I think exactly what the Torah says. Not just because the Torah told me to think that way, but because it makes sense. And in order to arrive at that properly, you need to question it, challenge it, and then find the answer and arrive at the conclusion that what the Torah is saying is exactly the way it's supposed to be.
When we learn Halacha, so they have more cheshbek.
So the question was asked for the benefit of the people that are listening on the Zoom. When you study halacha, do you have more cheshik to do the mitzvah afterwards? So I would imagine that to some extent the answer is probably yes, because you learned about it, so you're more familiar with it. You're more at home. You feel more at home with it. But we're talking here of something much more than halacha. We're talking about understanding the reasons for the halacha, understanding how the halacha developed, and how common sense arrives at that conclusion. So when you understand it, obviously it gives you more of a geschmack in it, right? So therefore, by chukim we could be yotzer just with doing it. But by mishpatim we have to go the extra mile and also understand where it's coming from, and that's why there needs to be a differentiation between edus, chukim, and mishpatim, because the way we fulfill edus, the way we fulfill chukim, and the way we fulfill mishpatim are a different approach. Nevertheless, we're told that it all comes from Sinai. In other words, the underlying basis of all mitzvahs is, this is what Hashem said. And that has to be the underlying foundation of commitment to all mitzvahs. Nevertheless, over here, it's not enough that you should do it. You also need to understand why you're doing it. And that's the idea of the uniqueness of Mishpatim. Now, an interesting thing The pasuk says, the first pasuk in Tehillim, probably most people are familiar. Ashrei ha'ish asher lehalach v'asas v'shoyim. Happy is the man who didn't walk in the counsel of the wicked. B'derech hatoyim lehalach v'shavleitzim le'yashav. Didn't walk in the ways of the b'derech hatoyim le'amad. Didn't walk in the ways of the sinners. Didn't sit in the place of the scoffers. Ki'im, but rather b'seiras Hashem cheftzoi. In the Torah of Hashem is his desire. U'b'seiras soyer, in his Torah yegeh b'yom b'layla, he engages day and night. So the question is, the pasuk starts by referring to the Torah as Torah's Hashem, Hashem's Torah. But a minute later, it changes and says, "U'v'seiras soyer," in his Torah, he engages day and night. Whose Torah is it? Is it Hashem's Torah or is it his Torah? So the Gemara asks this question. And the Gemara says that initially, before he studied it, was Hashem's Torah. I don't know what it's about. Hashem knows what it's about. But when you study it and you fully understand it, it becomes your Torah. And there's certain nafkaminas lahalacha about being meichel on the palmachim, being meichel on the covered. If it's another discussion. But clearly that there's a difference between Hashem's Torah and his Torah. So the question is, what's greater, Hashem's Torah or the person's Torah? Hashem's wisdom or the person's wisdom? Hashem is infinite. So obviously Hashem's wisdom is infinitely greater than the wisdom of a human being. So why does the pasuk seem to imply that the Torah's Hashem cheftzah, his desire is in the Torah of Hashem, is only the first stage, but then you're upgraded with a Torah, and in his Torah he engages day and night. Is his Torah an upgrade on Hashem's Torah? Is there anything greater than Hashem's Torah? Why is it implying that when it becomes his Torah, when he fully understands it, it becomes his Torah, that's an upgrade? If anything, sorry? I understand, but it's you're no longer looking at it because it's Hashem's Torah, now you're looking at it because it's his Torah, because he understands it, right? Hashem is infinite, his understanding is infinite. A human being is finite. Anything he can comprehend is only finite. And obviously, in order for it to be packaged in such a way that he should be able to understand it, it needed to be contracted in a way that a human mind can comprehend it. So why are we impressed with the Torah saying it became his Torah as a result of the fact that he understood it? It's not an upgrade. It's anything. It's a downgrade.
But surely being man, he never quite gets there. For example, we're told, for example, bugs, we can't eat bugs. And then the whole manufacture system changes, and all of a sudden, you can just go by across the road. So therefore, we are on a permanent learning basis of how we have to keep kosher completely. We never quite get there.
True, but here we're talking about that which we do comprehend, right? There are certain aspects of Torah that the Torah has enabled us to comprehend. And when we comprehend it, it becomes our Torah. So the question is, why is it becoming our Torah in any way an upgrade on it being Hashem's Torah? And the answer is very simple. The answer is, when it becomes our Torah, through the fact that we understood it, it doesn't cease to be Hashem's Torah. In other words, it's still the infinite wisdom of Hashem. But the wonder over here is that the infinite wisdom of Hashem was communicated in such a way that the human mind should be able to comprehend. And let me explain it in the following. There is the finite, there is the infinite, and then there's that which transcends both finitude and infinitude and transcends the difference between them. And I'll explain. You have, let's say in Shemus, names of Hashem. You have the name Elokim, which is Tzimtzum and Din and Hagbala, contraction, restriction, limitation. So Bereshis bara Elokim es Hashemayim v'ha'aretz. In the beginning, Elokim created heaven and earth. Why is creation associated with Shem Elokim? Very simple. Because the world is finite. So if the world will be created through a revelation of Hashem's infinite energy, the world would also be infinite, or it would be nullified by this great revelation. So the energy that goes into creating the world needs to be contracted, needs to be concealed. Bereshis bara Elokim, so we don't see the manifestation of Hashem's infinity in everything in the world. And therefore the world is finite. Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, represents Hashem's infinity. Now, if something is restricted to being infinite, it can only be infinite, but it can't be finite. Is it truly infinite? Infinite means without limits. If something is limited to being unlimited, is it truly unlimited? It has a limitation. It can only be unlimited. That's self a limitation. So true infinity is when you transcend the divide between the infinite and the finite. Just like you could be infinite, you can also be finite. Only then is one truly infinite. Or else one is restricted to being infinite. That itself is a limitation. That itself is a restriction. So the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, generally speaking, represents infinity. The name Elokim represents finitude. Anoichi, the essence of Hashem that's higher than being described with any name, transcends both infinitude and finitude. And therefore, the infinite can also be manifested in the finite. So it comes out that when Torah is communicated as this brilliant wisdom of Hashem, which is beyond the capacity for a human being to be able to get. So at Sinai, there was a tremendous revelation. Thunder and lightning and all the Yidden, Parcha Nishmasam, their souls expired from the great revelation. That was a manifestation of Hashem's infinite. This week said, the Mishpatim, where the Torah that comes from Sinai is given in such a manner that the human mind should be able to comprehend it. And nevertheless, it doesn't lose any of its authenticity, it doesn't lose any of its being Hashem's Torah. That is the fusion of the infinite and the finite in the most remarkable way. That the infinite wisdom of Hashem could be comprehended by the finite mind of a human being. So that's a revelation of a much greater dimension of godliness than there is in the infinitude which you see in Torah. Because that transcends the divide between the infinite and the finite. So it comes out that ve'ela, this week's Sedra, ve'ela hamishpatim is meisif al rishonim. It adds a whole new dimension to what we had before last week at Har Sinai. Because what we had last week at Har Sinai was a revelation of Hashem's infinitude. This week's Sedra, we come to a deeper dimension. We come to a level of godliness which transcends the division between finitude and infinitude. And therefore, Torah Tavayah, the Torah of the Almighty, as it's even higher than the name Haba, becomes Torah Soy of a human being. The human mind can comprehend it, and nevertheless, it's still Hashem's Torah. So it's phenomenal that what we understand with our limited minds is the infinity of Hashem's wisdom. And because Hashem is omnipotent, there's nothing that He can't do, therefore it's possible for the human mind to comprehend the infinite. Because Hashem wanted it to be that way. So we have to realize that we say, wow, this is incredible, this is brilliant. I have to realize, why am I capable of comprehending this brilliance? Because that took me Sinai. Because that's the way it came from Sinai. Hashem at Sinai gave us the ability to be able to connect with His infinite wisdom through the study of Torah and the comprehension of Torah. And this itself, this phenomenal dimension, is Sinai. What's unique about Har Sinai? Everybody knows, you ask anybody, what's unique about Har Sinai? Tell you, what do you learn from Har Sinai? Everybody will say, from Har Sinai you learn humility. Because Har Sinai was the lowest mountain. So Hashem wanted to teach us humility, so He didn't choose the high, really, He didn't the Everest or anything like that, and He gave it to Torah at Sinai, which is the lowest mountain. So I ask a question, if Hashem wanted to teach us humility, He could have given the Torah on a valley. Why did He choose a mountain at all? A mountain represents firmness, steadfastness, pride, which is important to have in Torah. But He chose the humblest mountain. So it's giving two opposite messages simultaneously. On one hand, you need to be firm and steadfast and proud. And at the same time, you need to be humble. You have to be the humblest mountain. So this is two contradictory, going in opposite direction messages coming together, and that's what Sinai represents. So the fusion of the infinite and the finite that we have in the understanding of Torah and Mishpatim, that comes Sinai. That comes from Mount Sinai that represents this fusion of opposites. It's a mountain, yet humble. It's infinite, yet finite. And this is actually why we find that in last week's Sedra, in Parshas Yisro, when Hashem tells Moshe to tell the Jewish people about the They're going to be receiving the Torah, the word of Hashem. So what do the Jewish people respond? They respond, Kol asher dibar Hashem, naaseh. Whatever Hashem says, we will do. We surrender to Hashem's authority. Whatever He tells us to do, we will do. In Parshas Mishpatim, toward the end of the Seder, you have a similar experience. Again, it talks about the preparations for Matan Torah at the end of Parshas Mishpatim. And what does it say? It says, Moshe comes to the Jewish people and tells them about the Torah. And they say, Kol asher dibar Hashem, naaseh v'nishma. We will do and we will listen. Why does it change from Parshas Yisro to Parshas Mishpatim? Why in Parshas Yisro is it naaseh, and in Parshas Mishpatim it's naaseh v'nishma? Because naaseh means we will do. We're not going to give opinions. We're just going to do what we're told. That's the message of Parshas Yisro. There's a revelation of the infinity of Hashem with thunder and lightning, and the Jewish people say, Al hen hen v'alav ha. Whatever you say, yes, yes. Whatever you say, no, don't do, no, we won't do it. We're not going to ask any questions. But in this week's Seder Mishpatim, the Torah is requiring a much deeper commitment. The Torah is requiring that we should also listen, we should also hear, we should also try to understand and try to comprehend and take it in, internalize it. And that can only be achieved by, first of all, naaseh, an absolute commitment. Whether I will understand or I won't understand, I'm going to do it anyway. But v'nishma, I'm going to make every effort to comprehend it so that I can also internalize it and integrate it into my own being. Because Hashem doesn't want it just to be a surrender. He wants that we should absorb it to the point that it becomes our Torah. And that's the uniqueness of Parshas Mishpatim. And incidentally, you have a similar concept in Parshas Shkolim. Parshas Shkolim, it says that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to pass on to the Jewish people that everyone should give a half shekel to atone for their souls. So, and it says in the pasuk, this is what they shall do. So the Mefarshim want to know, what does it mean, this? This is you point with your finger and you say this. We find this zeh being used in an instruction from Hashem to Moshe. We find it in a number of places. We find it by the Kiddush HaChedesh that we spoke about a few weeks ago. It said, Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu exactly what the moon is supposed to look like at the moment of the birth of the moon. And he said, HaChedesh Hazeh, Pazer Eivah Kaddish, this is when it looks like this is when you should sanctify the moon. We find it by the menorah, which is very complicated, very difficult. And Hashem said, V'zeh ma'aseh ha-menorah. This is exactly what the menorah is supposed to look like. He showed Moshe Rabbeinu a menorah, shel eish, menorah of fire, and he said, this is exactly what it's supposed to look like. And we find it by the Machzis Hashem. So the question is asked, what's the zeh by the Machzis Hashem? So it says that Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu a matbeya shel eish, a coin of fire, a half shekel of fire in heaven. And he said, this is exactly what they should do. And everybody wants to understand. In the case of the menorah, we understand it's a very complicated piece of artwork, sculpture. In the case of the moon, you have to know exactly what the moon is supposed to look like at that point. But what's the problem with the half shekel? Wasn't the half shekel a common coin? Why did he have to show him a coin of fire? Could have told him to give a half a shekel. You know, everybody knows what a 50p coin looks like. That's what it should be. So one of the answers given is, Moshe Rabbeinu, what was bothering him was, Hashem said it's an atonement for your soul. It's an atonement for your soul. The Jewish people had sinned the golden calf. And here they're being told that an atonement for your soul is to give a half a shekel to the Mishkan. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, that doesn't make sense to me. How could giving a half a shekel be an atonement for your soul? For surely to atone for your soul, you have to do something massive. Just give a half a shekel, 50p, atonement for my soul. Done. What's going on? So Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu a coin of fire. When a Jew does a mitzvah, he doesn't just do the mitzvah. He puts life into the mitzvah. He puts passion into the mitzvah. He puts fire into the mitzvah. And when it's a coin of fire, then it's not a wonder that it's able to atone for your soul. So the Baal Shem Tov gives a mashal about a blacksmith that was teaching an apprentice. the art of blacksmithing. And the apprentice was following and doing a great job. And finally, the blacksmith said to the apprentice, I think you know all the tricks of the trade. You can go open up on your own. So he went to the next town and he opened up his own shop. And the first customer came along and he did exactly what he saw with his teacher. He banged here and there and the other and it didn't work. And he can't figure out why it's not working. When he worked with his master blacksmith, it always worked. So he goes back to his master and he says, what am I doing wrong? He says, did you knock it this way? Yes. Did you do this? Yes. Everything exactly as you taught me. He said, 1 minute, did you put a fire? Did you light a fire underneath? He says, he never told me about that. He says, without a fire, it's not going to work. You have to light a fire. And then when you have a fire burning and the metal is melting, then you can bang it here and there and get it sorted. He said, Baal Shem Tov says, the Yiddishkeit is the same thing. Yes, there's rules. You got to do it like this. You got to do it like that. But underneath the whole thing, there needs to be a fire. There needs to be a passion. There needs to be a dedication, a devotion. And that's what makes it work. That's what makes l'chaper al nafshei. So that's one interpretation. However, if you look at the words matbeya shel eish, coin of fire, it seems to be a contradiction in terms. What is a matbeya? What's a coin? A piece of metal is not a coin. When a piece of metal is shaped exactly in a certain way, that's when it becomes a coin. Right? That's the definition of a coin. If it's not shaped exactly the way that it's meant to be, it's not a coin, it's just a chunk of metal. Fire is the only thing that we have in the physical world that does not keep a shape. Right? Solids keep a shape. Liquids don't keep a shape in their liquid form, but you can put them inside something that will keep it in shape. You can freeze it to keep a shape. There's one thing that will never keep a shape, and that is fire. So a matbeya shel eish, a coin of fire, is a contradiction in terms. Either it's a coin or it's fire. What does it mean that Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu a coin of fire? The answer is that's exactly what Torah mitzvahs is. On one hand, Torah mitzvahs is a connection with the infinity of Hashem. And since it's a connection with the infinity of Hashem, it requires infinite passion and infinite dedication and infinite enthusiasm. At the same time, it's a coin. It's shaped exactly in a certain way. Every mitzvah has its strict rules of exactly how it has to be fulfilled. So how do you take the infinite and put it into the finite? It doesn't make any sense. But as we said before, Hashem is above the divide or the differentiation between infinite and finite. So Hashem is infinite, and he says to us, you want to connect with me in my infinitude, the way to do it is exactly this way. It's a coin of fire. Because Hashem transcends the divide between the infinite and the finite, and by joining the infinite and the finite together, that's the way we connect it.
So what it is, I can come up, say, and make a coin in the box. I drink it roast because it's a job. In the fire, I'm thinking what I'm doing.
Thinking, you're feeling, your neshama is involved in it. The good news is that even when we're not consciously doing it, our subconsciousness, which is the essence of our neshama, is always involved. So really the fire is there whether you see it or not. But it's best to work on bringing it out in a way that we should actually see it. Okay, we're going to move over to Tanya unless there's any questions on what we discussed today. The coin that Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu was made of fire. But the coin that we give to tzedakah is a regular coin, but we make it into fire by the fire with which we do the mitzvah. You mean in the story with Hashem showing Moshe Rabbeinu the coin?
The coin, no, when you think of a coin, it's shaped, it's got to be when it's shaped
when it's formed, when it's made.
Yeah, so what are you trying to say?
So when Hashem showed me the kind of fire, the coin already has a lot of fire impact inside.
Understand, but in principle, fire and coin are opposites. If it's fire, then it doesn't hold a shape, right? If it's a coin, It has to have a shape. So the idea is that the fusion of these two opposites, on one hand, there's unlimited passion, unlimited devotion, unlimited enthusiasm, and that is manifest in a finite act, which has very specific restrictions. And similarly, in the study of Torah, Torah is Hashem's wisdom. It's infinite. But what we study is a finite halacha that is very clear. This is this, and this is this. And we study that halacha, we're connecting with the infinity of Hashem's wisdom. So it's incredible that the infinite and the finite join together as well. In Tanya, I believe we're towards the end of chapter 4. It's page Tess on top of the page, and 18, the number on the bottom of the page. There's 17 in the English and 18 in the...
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Number 18 on the bottom of the page.
18?
I believe so.
17
I think we're on the second line from the top on page Tess. V'lochein amru. Now, on page Tess, yeah. So to remind everyone what we were talking about over here, remember that we spoke about in chapter 3 in Perek Gimel, we learned about that the soul has 10 faculties. 3 intellectual faculties, Chachma, Bina, and Das, and 7 emotional faculties, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. So what is the person? The person is his understanding. The person is his feelings. What is he excited about? What is he enthusiastic about? That defines the person. If a person understands that godliness is the only commodity that is worth investing in, the only true existence, and everything else in his understanding is worthless, he's one kind of a person. If a person understands that money and attention and covet and luxuries are the important things in life, and godliness is something that Yotze was a little bit, you say, Amen Yishmerabah once in a while, and you're good enough, then he's a different kind of person. Right? His priorities are different. His whole attitude to what life is all about, it's a whole different world. Similarly, emotionally, if a person is passionate about godliness, about Torah study, about fulfillment of mitzvahs, about educating Jewish children to follow in the ways of Torah mitzvahs, about kindness in the way of Yiddishkeit, he's passionate about what Hashem is passionate about, then he's one kind of person. If a person is passionate about his temptations and his passions, and godliness is not something that really excites him, he's a whole different kind of person. So your intellect and your emotion define who you are. So that's the nefesh itself is composed of 10 components, 3 intellectual components, Chachma, Bina, Das, and 7 emotional components, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. That's what we learned in chapter 3. Then in chapter 4, we went on to say that the soul also has 3 garments. What are the 3 garments? Thought, speech, and deed. And being that we're speaking here about the godly soul, so it's the thought, speech, and deed which connect you to Hashem. Which thought, speech, and deed connects you to Hashem? The thought of Torah, the speech of Torah, and the action, the deed of mitzvahs. Through Torah and mitzvahs, you become connected to Hashem. So these are the garments of the soul, because the soul expresses its inner self, which is its understanding and its emotion, through these garments. Your understanding is expressed through your thought. Your feelings are expressed through your deeds. Not only expressed through, but they actually enclose themselves in the deeds. As we explained, that when you do a mitzvah, and the mitzvah is full of fire, it's full of passion, then the emotion doesn't just remain in the heart and causes the act to be done. The emotion actually encloses itself in the action, and the action becomes a living, fiery action as a result of the fact that the emotion is invested in it. So these are the levushei hanefesh, the garments of the soul. And we explained that one of the reasons it's called garments is because just like a garment in the physical world is something you can put on and take off. You can change it for another garment. It doesn't really define who you are. Similarly, our actions and our speech and our thought is something that we can, at any given moment, decide to think a certain thought or say a certain word, or do a certain act, it doesn't define who we are. Because a minute later, we could be doing the very opposite, or saying the very opposite, or thinking the very opposite. It's like a garment. You take it off, put it on, take it off. While when you're talking about what does a person actually feel, what does a person actually understand, that is a more of a defining reality. So the general impression that we got from the beginning of chapter 4 was that the thing to focus on most is understanding and emotion. Thought, speech, and deed, they're only the garments. They're only the external part of it. That was the impression that we got from the beginning of chapter 4. Then, for a little bit further down the page, the Alter Rebbe comes along and says, but 1 minute. These 3 garments of Torah and mitzvahs, they are really infinitely greater than the soul itself, meaning than the emotions and the intellect of the soul itself. Why? Because what are these 3 garments? They're thought, speech, and deed of Torah and mitzvahs. Torah and mitzvahs are one with the Almighty Himself. Torah is the wisdom of the Almighty, and He and His wisdom are one. And mitzvahs are the will of the Almighty, and He and His will are one. So even though when you're talking as far as what's closer to the person, of course the person's inner self is more the person than his actions are. The actions are external. But these actions are the actions of mitzvahs. This thinking is the thinking of Torah, which is one with Hashem Himself. Your emotions, your love for God, your fear of God, that's your perspective of God. That's how you feel about God. That's not God Himself. Torah and mitzvahs is the Almighty Himself. And therefore, Torah and mitzvahs is infinitely greater than the emotional feelings that a person feels. And we had a whole discussion about this, about you meet someone and tell you that they're Jew at heart, they don't get caught up with the details. Yeah, and we explained why that's not a valid argument, because at the end of the day, Hashem and His wisdom are one, Hashem and His will are one. So if this is Hashem's will, this is Hashem Himself. So when you fulfill a mitzvah, you're connecting to the essence of Hashem. When you're feeling Hashem, it's your feelings. It's not Hashem. When you're understanding Hashem, it's your understanding of Hashem. That's not the real essence of Hashem. Hashem is beyond anything you can understand. Hashem is beyond anything you can feel. It's your perspective of Hashem. But the essence of Hashem is in Torah and Mitzvah. And therefore, the shleisha levushim of Torah and Mitzvah, machshava, dibur, ma'aseh, thought, speech, and deed of Torah and Mitzvah, that's where you connect to the essence of Hashem. Is that clear? Now, in a sense, I'm not sure if I told the story. There was a chassid called Rabbi Hillel Paritcher. Rabbi Hillel Paritcher was a chassid of the Mittler Rebbe and Tzemach Tzedek. It's a great chassid. In any other circle, he would have been considered one of the greatest Rebbes, but in Chabad, he was a chassid. And he was, one of his tasks that he was given was to educate young men, mechanech young men. So he had a group of chassidim that he taught, that he inspired, and he educated them, he guided them. So one of the stories that he would tell is the following story. He would say, a famous story of a mayor of Rothenburg. The mayor of Rothenburg lived about 1,000 years ago, in the Middle Ages, in Germany. And there was a lot of hardship. And he was a great Torah scholar. And the governor of the province where he lived had him arrested. He was the rabbi of the community. And the governor had him arrested. And he required a large ransom to liberate him. And the mayor of Rothenburg wrote a response from his prison cell to the community, telling them that it's forbidden to ransom him. Because, first of all, it's a halacha. You're not allowed to ransom captives for more than their market price worth. And they were asking for an exorbitant amount of money. And second of all, he said, it's a sensible thing. You're going to ransom me. The governor of the next town is going to arrest the rabbi of his town and ask for another ransom. We have to put our foot down once and for all and say, we don't do this kind of business. And because he paskined that it's forbidden to ransom him, they didn't ransom him. And he spent the rest of his life in prison until he passed away. When he passed away, so the Jewish community came to the governor, and they said, release his body so we can bury him, give him a Jewish burial. So the governor said, pay the ransom, I'll release his body. So, and his body languished in prison for a long time after his passing. Many years later, a merchant from a faraway community passed through the town. And he heard about this. And he was very upset. And he went to see the governor. He was a man of means. He went to see the governor. He negotiated with him. And they came to some kind of an agreement, gave him a certain amount of money, and they released the body for burial. So, burial took place, and the story up till here is history. Then the story goes that night, the mayor of Rothenburg, Rabbi Rothenburg, came in a dream to this man, the man who made the arrangement with the governor to get the body released. He came in a dream to him, and he said, "First of all, I want to thank you very much for what you did. It's an incredible thing, and I want to reward you. And I'm giving you two options of what you would want that reward to be. One option is, it could be a reward in the physical world. Wealth, good health, success. The money that you put out for the ransom, you'll earn back in your business deals very quickly. And you'll live a good life, you and your family. Everything will be wonderful. But that offer only pertains to this world. The next world, I'm not offering you anything. That's one option. The other option is, you can have your reward in the world to come. And I'm giving the reward that I'm offering you is imi b'mchitzasi. You'll have a place in my compartment in Gan Eden. I'll share with you my compartment in Gan Eden. But if you take that offer, then there's nothing's on the offer here in this world. In fact, you'll have to collect your reward very soon. You choose. You can have one of the two, whatever you choose. So he thought to himself, the first offer sounds very attractive. And he'll have health and wealth and time to enjoy it, and everything's going to be wonderful. However, how long could it be for? 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, for how long is it going to be? And then it's going to end. The second offer is forever. So he chose the second offer. And shortly afterwards, he passed away. And I actually heard from my mechutin, Rabbi Diskin in Munich, that he was in the place where he's buried in Rothenburg. And right next to the mayor of Rothenburg is another grave of this man who ransomed him, who arranged his body to be released. He's buried right next to him. And we assume that he kept his word, and he's has a great place in the mayor of Rothenburg's chamber in Gan Eden. Reb Hillel Paritcher said to his students that it's obvious that this man lived before the Baal Shem Tov. It's obviously, historically, it's obvious. But he said in the context of the story, you can see that he lived before the Baal Shem Tov, before the revelation of Hasidic Torah. Because had he had learned Hasidus, he would have realized that one mitzvah, one opportunity to do a mitzvah, is connecting with the infinite essence of Hashem, is worth more than the whole of Gan Eden. So if he would have opted to live another day, another week, another year, another 10 years, another 20 years, imagine how many mitzvahs he could have done in the course of that time. And each one of those mitzvahs is infinitely greater than the whole of Gan Eden. Because the whole of Gan Eden is only benefiting from the rays of the Shekhinah. which is much more delightful than all of Olam Hazeh, all of this world put together. Right? One opportunity to have delight in the world to come is greater than all of this world. If a person would live 1,000 years and be a king of kings and not lack anything in the world, it wouldn't compare to one moment of pleasure in Gan Eden, in the world to come. But all of the world to come doesn't compare to one opportunity to do a mitzvah. Because a mitzvah is a connection with the infinite essence of Hashem. You're one with Hashem when you do a mitzvah. When you study Hashem's Torah, the Torah is one with Hashem. You're connecting with the essence of Hashem. Gan Eden is only the rays of the Shekhinah. It's only getting you're getting a delight from the rays of the Shekhinah, but you're not connecting with it. It's not the real thing. The real thing is Torah and mitzvahs.
Surely, when he did this, he didn't do it for the reward.
That's not the issue. He didn't do it for the reward. After he did it, he was given an option for reward. Yes? So the point that I'm trying to bring out is like this. Just like there is this world and the world to come, this world being here up to 120 years old and the world to come after 120, so there is during our lifetime, there's also this world and the world to come. This world is the opportunity to do mitzvahs, the opportunity to study Torah. That's this world. Because here we have the opportunity to connect to the infinite essence of Hashem through doing a mitzvah, through studying Torah. Then there is inspiration. I feel inspired. I feel the holiness. I'm in love with Hashem. That's great. But that's only my perspective. That's not the real thing. The real thing is, what does Hashem say? Hashem says, do a mitzvah. That's the real thing. Hashem says, study Torah. That's the real thing. So there is Gan Eden in this world. Moments of inspiration. Moments of spiritual high. Love of Hashem. Fear of Hashem. That's the Gan Eden in this world. And the Olam Hazeh in this world is doing mitzvahs. Learning Torah. Having the real connection with the essence of Hashem through Torah and mitzvahs. Which you can only do in this world.
Inspiration.
True. So if a person says, I need inspiration, because the inspiration will inspire me to do mitzvahs. And the mitzvahs are what it's all about. So then he's using the Gan Eden experiences that he has in this world to inspire him to do mitzvahs, because he realizes that the mitzvah is what it's all about. But if a person is distracted from the mitzvahs because he's all excited about the Gan Eden, and therefore he's excited about the moments of inspiration, but doesn't focus on getting the job done, then he's missing the point. Because the point is the connection with the essence of Hashem that Torah and mitzvahs offers. So when we understood in this chapter that the three garments of the soul, which are the thought, speech, and deed of Torah and mitzvahs, are infinitely greater than the spiritual experiences of the soul, love of Hashem, fear of Hashem, understanding Hashem, then we're also understanding what the Mishnah says, that one opportunity to do Torah and mitzvahs in this world is infinitely greater than all of the reward of the world to come. Because it's a similar concept. And let's learn that inside. We have a few minutes, let's hop it up. So again, we're on page test, the second line. The Lachein Amru, and therefore our sages say, Yafa Shah Achas V'tshuva Ma'asim Tovim L'Olam Hazeh, Mikol Chayei Ha'olam Haba. One opportunity, one Shah Kamina Ker, turning of Torah and mitzvahs in this world, Torah and good deeds in this world, is greater than all of the world to come. Why? The world to come is where they benefit from the rays of the Shekhinah. True Tainug HaSaga, which is the delight that comes from comprehension. The Shamas in Gan Eden have an incredible comprehension of the greatness of Hashem. And the greater the comprehension, the greater the delight. The higher they are in Gan Eden, the greater the comprehension, the greater the delight. Now we know that no created being, even the loftiest created beings, even the greatest angels and the greatest souls in the celestial heights, can only comprehend a ray of the light of Hashem. Hashem is infinite. You can't comprehend the essence of Hashem. You can maximum comprehend the rays of the light of Hashem. Therefore, we refer to the rewarding Gan Eden as the rays of the Shekhinah. But the Almighty in His essence and in His glory, no thought can grasp Him whatsoever. With the only exception of when He is grasped, when He encloses Himself in Torah mitzvahs, which Hashem chose, as we explained earlier in the Shiur. Hashem chose to invest His infinite essence in the finite concepts of Torah and the finite act of a mitzvah. So when you engage in study of Torah, the performance of a mitzvah, then you're grasping and enclosing yourself literally in the Almighty Himself. Because the Torah and the Almighty are literally one. Yes.
It's not doing mitzvah, just doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're asking a very good question. Question was, if you're doing mitzvahs, but your brain is not engaged. Yeah?
But whilst the mitzvah's really hard, and just really hard to do, and you don't enjoy doing it.
You don't end up doing it.
You don't enjoy doing it.
Don't enjoy doing it, right? So how important is it to have your brain involved? How important is it to enjoy it? And how important it is to actually do it? Yeah? So it's a very good question. And the answer, based on what we just learned here, is very clear. That the essence of the connection with the infinity of Hashem comes through doing Hashem's will. So if you do the right thing, whether your mind was there, whether you enjoyed it, you have the essence of the connection.
Even if you don't mean it.
Even if you don't mean it. You did it, you have the essence of the connection.
But you don't mean it.
Woman. However, and it's a whole different section in Tanya. This is elaborated on. That the Almighty wants not only that we should do and have that connection, He also wants it to be a luminous connection. Meaning it should be a connection that is a revealed connection. We should experience that connection also. And therefore, one should make every effort to understand what one is doing, to put one's mind into what one is doing, to try and the more you understand what you're doing, the more delight you have in what you're doing, the more you enjoy what you're doing. So therefore, not at the expense of doing. A person should always engage in Torah mitzvahs, even if it's not for the right reason, even if he doesn't enjoy it, even if he's not, his heart is not in it. And we explained in a previous Shiur that has two meanings. One meaning is that as a result of doing it, you'll do it for the right reason. And the deeper meaning is that on the surface you're doing it without meaning it and without understanding it and without putting your mind to it and without having the delight in it. But deep down you have a neshama, and that neshama knows exactly where it's at, and that neshama feels the connection to Hashem. So whether you're consciously aware of that connection or not, subconsciously you're definitely aware of the connection, and subconsciously you're definitely delighting in it, and subconsciously you're really in it. And therefore, from within the Shalai Lishma, beneath the surface, there is a Lishma, and that Lishma will ultimately come to the surface. So therefore, just in conclusion, do them. Every time you have an opportunity to do a mitzvah, jump at it. And know that it's the most precious thing in the world. And obviously one needs to think about it and contemplate it and learn about it and read the right things and attend the right fabrengens and get inspired so that connection which is there with the essence of Hashem becomes illuminated and becomes something that comes from our subconsciousness into our consciousness. Because Hashem wants it to be in our consciousness. But if we did the mitzvah, we have the connection, the essence of the connection. And if we didn't do the mitzvah, all the good intentions and all the good thoughts and all the good inspiration is not the essence of the connection. So you can be very inspired and not be connected. I use a mashal about in a relationship. Yeah. So you have a husband that tells his wife 1,000,000 times, I love you, I love you, I love you. But when I ask you to do the dishes, you're not home. You're not there, right? So what I want you to do, you're not doing for me. So is that really love? You have to put it into the practice that means something to me. So at the end of the day, what does Hashem want from us? Hashem wants us to study His Torah and do His mitzvahs. So that's what we have to get out and doing. That connects us with His essence. The fact that we feel very uplifted It's a beautiful thing. We feel uplifted, but that's not Hashem. Hashem is one with his will and one with his wisdom. So if we want to have a connection to the essence of Hashem, it has to be through the fulfillment of his will. I think that's pretty clear and straightforward.
But from Sabbath as well, that means if you can do a mitzvah, it's really good. So you get more that. You are more into that. And you are more into it.
Okay, so let me just comment on that. The question.
And simple, because the more it's difficult, it's more simple.
Very good question. Okay, let me just repeat the question for the benefit of the people that didn't hear and for the benefit of people on the Zoom. The fum tzayda agra means according to the pain is the gain, which means that a person does a mitzvah, it's very difficult for them. They're rewarded with greater reward. So the question was, then where's the joy in the mitzvah? So first let me point out, what's the reason why when you do a mitzvah, which is more difficult, there's greater reward? The reward is only a reflection of the essence of the matter. When a person does a mitzvah that is very difficult for them, so they are subduing their nefesh habamis, their animal soul, their yetzer hara, their sitra achra within themselves. And when we subdue the negative forces within ourselves, that gives tremendous delight to HaKadosh Baruch. It's a special mitzvah. Don't stray after your heart and your eyes, which you tend to stray after. And that the Zohar says that the delight that causes to the Almighty is immeasurable. So the more one is going against one's natural desires to fulfill a mitzvah, that puts a special value into the mitzvah. And because it gives a special value into the mitzvah, that's why the reward is great. So if a person realizes how special it is to do the mitzvah when it's difficult, and the more difficult it is, the more special it is, that itself gives them joy. In the difficulty, they have joy. Right? A woman went by the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was distributing dollars. And she said to the Rebbe that it's difficult for me to stand all this time. The Rebbe is older than me. How could the Rebbe stand here for so many hours? And so the Rebbe said, when you're counting diamonds, you don't get time. The idea is to realize that a mitzvah is a diamond. A diamond is an understatement. It's an infinite diamond. And when it's difficult, it's a even more shiny diamond. And when you realize that and you keep telling that to yourself until you get through to yourself with that message, then the greater the challenge, the greater the joy. Welcome.